when things eventually return to quote unquote normal, I think, just in my opinion, I think that the world has kind of seen now just all the things that can be done working virtually and working remotely that weren't maybe happening before. So, I mean, I would say that I would continue to expect webinars to be growing and to be sort of a hot lever for marketers, even when things do return to normal. I would expect that eventually when people might get back to going to conferences in person, you might see more of an integration of in-person and sort of virtual strategies where you can sort of mix things up, having an in-person event and mixing some digital strategies in there, and then vice versa. But I mean, in terms of like overall like tips for marketers, I mean, something I occasionally have to do training sessions internally for some of my product marketers. And something I always like to tell them is to plan everything in reverse. Like I said earlier, plan backwards. What is the outcome that you need from your webinar? What are the KPIs? How are you even measuring success for your webinar? What does success look like? Another thing which I would suggest is whenever there's a chance to build in interactivity, that's always key. I think that in the world now, consumers have a very high level of expectations on their digital experiences, whether that's shopping or consuming content. So if there's a way that you can have the audience do a poll or a survey or a Q&A or interact with the speaker or basically just something else besides just like sitting there listening to a PowerPoint, that's always key to, I guess, retention and getting people really into what you're talking about. Something else which I'll suggest is you always want to have a strategy for being able to understand what are the actionable sales leads and who are the folks that just came to the webinar maybe just to check it out, but they're not really qualified to purchase things. So I always like to try to have that step sort of figured out up front with our marketers too. At one point we were filtering out registrants for webinars by their job title, especially for like B2B webinars. And that was kind of like driving a lot of what were looked at as leads versus just people that just attended. We recently implemented some automated lead scoring, which factors in job titles as well as some other criteria. So I guess the key is just being able to understand at the end of the day, if you have 500 people at your webinar, who are the ones that sales needs to call versus who are the ones maybe you just want to put them into a drip or a nurture stream. Maybe they're not ready to buy yet, or there's another product you could cross-sell them on. So I would say just being able to give sales the good leads is something that's going to make you very popular. And then the last thing, Piyush, I'll mention is just that I think a lot of marketers fall into the trap of looking at their webinar content and their marketing from a very inside out kind of a perspective. Like, this is my product, these are the features, come buy it. And I think a lot of times marketers should kind of trying to be sort of flipping that and looking at it sort of more outside in, like from the perspective of the customer. Like, what are my pain points? What are my challenges? Like, how would this webinar help me solve a problem or accomplish something that I can't do? And I think that it's really essential for people to kind of position webinars that way in terms of like, what is this webinar, like what's in it for me? Like back to my days working with some sales folks, they used to always tell me that, what's in it for me? So I think it's really important to make that clear for people that you're marketing webinars to, or otherwise, I mean, there's so many digital virtual events happening, most likely they might just end up passing. So come right out of the gate with that value statement and try to have that understanding of your customer persona.